Welcome to Nerding Out with Coldbore, where we dive into cutting-edge data shaping today's world, as well as explore innovative technologies driving today's energies industry. I'm Craig Bergman, joined by
Derek Mathewson.
And today we're excited to feature our very first guest on the podcast, John Thompson from Saga Wisdom. He'll share his insights on unlocking production potential and transforming energy training. As always, we'll give you our nerdy take on trending news topics, as well as sharing interesting memes of the day and more. Let's dive in.
Hey, John, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Thanks. Nice to see you, boys.
Yeah, long-time listener, first-time caller.
That's right. Yeah, I've seen lots of clips of the show with lots of my friends being in this seat, so it's fun to be here.
That's fantastic. Well, tell us about yourself. Can you give us a little blip on your background and your connection to Coldbore?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm a kid who was raised in Kingston, Ontario. I moved out to Calgary about 25 years ago. I sort of stumbled into the oil and gas industry like so many others that, were living in Alberta. Ended up doing a master's degree at the University of Calgary in chemical engineering. My undergrad was mining engineering from Queens and Kingston, and then I became a practicing reservoir petroleum engineer with Fiquet. That was about 2009. Anyway, I became a rate transient analysis practitioner and instructor around that time. They essentially threw a software at me. This company was famous for consultancy and for the software tools that they created, primarily subsurface, technical softwares.
And I know everyone's going to ask, what is a rate transient analysis? We'll get to that later in the show.
Yeah, it's actually not that hard. So, but anyway, I'd run across the country like the U.S. operators, Canadian operators, a splash of international, and teaching people workflows, engineering workflows for reservoir characterization to development planning and production forecasting and that sort of thing. And that's RTA's advanced production data analysis and modeling. So it's just looking at data that comes off of wellheads, rates and pressures, and you draw lines through those data points, and you do a lot of different types of plots. And from that, you sort of extract some reservoir rock and performance parameters, and you say this is what's going on in the ground from some surface data. So it's a lot of arm waving and interpretation, and these are some well-established techniques that operators use to again, do their field development planning. So that's what I did for, the bulk of my oil and gas career. And, in the last half dozen years, I've been breaking away from that to focus on a digital learning company, which I've co-founded with a few buddies.
Outstanding. Well, really excited to get into all that.
Yeah. Are you still doing the rate transient analysis?
I'm still doing a lot of the business development for it. So when people when it's solicited, when it's like, hey, Dave Anderson and John Thompson, we're kind of known, commodities in the space of RTA, which isn't a huge space. There's not a ton of experts out there. There's a number, but Dave is the real guru there. He's the the consummate distinguished lecturer, and he was VP of software at Fiquet, and he's probably the one of the biggest celebrities in the world in the space. And so, between Dave and I started right at the advent of the unconventionals boom, like the shale boom, Barnett, Woodford, that very rapidly turned into Marcellus and Haynesville and Eagle Ford and others. So I was the guy doing RTA on shales, and at that time they didn't even know if it was going to be a passing fancy. So the two of us built our, really focused on that for, the better part of a decade. And do I still do it? Occasionally. When I've got the relationships, I'm not looking for the work.
Yeah.
Dave does it, and so if it comes across my desk, I usually negotiate the proposal, and I'll button it up. I've been doing that for years, and then I just hand it to Dave. So, and try to maybe get involved in managing the relationship. But it's the consultancy work isn't really the focus anymore for me.
Very interesting. Cool. Well, I'm excited to jump into more of that, but I think we'll dive into the news story. Craig, you want to?
Actually, this one was brought to us by John. John, you want to introduce our news story of the day?
Yeah, well, you know what? This one was actually brought to this by your colleague there, Julian Magic. So he was telling me a story that I've now had a chance to look up. And I had no idea that Alberta is going to be potentially the host of a $70 billion AI data center in a place not far out from Grande, Prairie, in a place that they're going to be calling, what is it, Wonder
Valley?
Wonder Valley.
Yeah.
So Kevin O'Leary was on TV and saying, I guess he's involved in the project. And I've been hearing things from, I don't know if it was Pat Carlson, but there's a lot of chatter with some of the big oil and gas names in town. And this is humongous, like a $70 billion AI data center. I believe that would be the biggest in the world. And, this would be like 4 times, in terms of cost, 4x the Kitimat LNG terminal. So this is like tremendous money, and they're going to do a $1.8 billion capital raise to get it kicked off. And it's like I want to say a 5, 6, 7 year type project. So huge. And I guess what I want to talk to you guys about it is the why. And, before this kicked off, I know you guys were saying, well, it's cold up there. That's useful because things get hot, I assume, in a data center. And of course, the cost of nat gas that isn't being used for power generation, and it's not hitting the grid. I assume that's pretty attractive. I would guess Canada's got the lowest or one of the lowest nat gas prices out there. So you combine those 2 criteria, and it's like, wow, of course. So I want to scramble and take any dollars I have and buy some properties out there. So I don't know. What do you guys think about this new project?
I think, you hit the nail on the head. And actually, it's funny, Alex, our CTO, we've been talking about kind of this idea for a while. He's always saying, like, why don't we put a data center out there? And then this kind of news comes out. It looks like other people have that idea, and a lot of people kind of share that. And I think it's both that the cheap gas that's there is cold, and there's probably, as far as land goes, it's not the most expensive land out there. It's not quite as cheap as if you go a little bit more north, but pretty cheap land for I imagine they would need good 100,000 square feet.
I've never been to GP. I know that most Albertans in this industry have, so I don't even know what it looks like, but this is going to like transform the city, like something fierce.
Well, the other thing is I wonder about GP's relative population density versus education. And I think because of exposure to oil and gas and because, speaking out of imagination land, but I would expect to have some type of gross income versus education rate for families being like more money means more access to education means higher educations. So having a higher educated populace being closer to a data center probably makes a lot of sense. Also, the Canadian drilling and the access to jobs. Like, not only do we have a higher educated populace, we have relatively cheap nat gas, cheap cooling, and cheap land, but we also have, I'm going to argue, a declining Canadian oil and gas sector. So we have lower jobs, high education, cheapness. That's a kind of a perfect place to meet in the middle with a large data center.
Yeah, it would be a huge shift for GP. Like for a project that large, that'd be thousands of jobs. Tons of technical talent that doesn't exist in GP today.
Well, and the provincial government is like always got these grants and incentives for entrepreneurs to diversify our economy away from being like unimodally energy centric, or at least oil and gas centric.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, I know more about this because I'm one of the guys who's trying to apply for some of these grants and saying, hey, it's not an oil and gas platform, it's an education technology. And so it's for the energy industry that's broader than just oil and gas. And so, Alberta is still like other markets like Oklahoma City and other places. It's still like really oil and gas, but this data center would really, really like serve to, put us more on the map. I'd say as, I don't know if you want to call it a tech hub, but I mean, if you've got a $70 billion AI data center, that's a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do we know the power? Did they share that on the article?
1.6 gigawatt upfront.
Okay. And I was learning a bit about data centers because they'll have battery backups because they need a 99.99% uptime. So they'll need 1.6 gigawatts of batteries on site as well.
Eventually offer 7.5 gigawatt of energy.
Oh, Northwest Alberta could eventually offer 7.5. Because what are we at now, like 6 or something like this?
It's pretty outside of what I can just pull out. There it is, 1.4 gigawatts up front.
Yeah. Yeah, so there'll be a lot of work on the grid trying to make that part happen. But the power's already there. It'd just be updating the grid and really just our own GP, right? It's not like it has to be all of Alberta or something.
Yeah, well, I think of like a cogen facility, if we get back to oil and gas, and it's sort of like, I don't know what the infrastructure would look like, but all the nat gas that's up there in abundance, rather than burying it in the ground with carbon sequestration, and like we'll get to it later, the idea that it could be fueling, or powering this tech center, that sounds pretty awesome, and pretty attractive. And I don't know the specifics of how that would get executed, but on the surface, it sounds pretty clever.
Yeah.
A lot better than flaring it off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, for the oil wells, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us, there's some larger complicated things that we're talking about there. That kind of brings us to our main topic. Tell us about ray transient analysis in your arm waving paper.
Yeah. Well, when anybody interprets data, there's always a little bit of arm waving. So what RTA is as I mentioned before, it's advanced production data analysis and modeling. And what that really means is that the data that is the feedstock for the science that operators use to inform them about field development decisions and coming up with more reliable production forecasts for the purposes of reserves, which of course influences their stock price, is the data is flowing pressures from a wellhead, typically surface pressures, tubing or casing pressure, because you've got to know how the well is being operated. Is it at a high percentage drawdown or a low percentage drawdown, and you're really trying to get those rates up as high as they can go, or are you choked back? So a lot of the information that the reservoir is trying to communicate at surface is contained in those pressures. And of course, you've got your three rates. You've got your water, your oil, or condensate, and your water, gas, oil. And so that's really the main stuff with RTA that you're looking at. And then the other stuff is a basic understanding of the rock properties, or the geological properties or petrophysical parameters, and sort of your fluid properties. Some people would call that PVT. So you get into things like initial reservoir pressure is pretty important, and we can talk a little bit about how we get that later. Porosity, saturations, net pay, that's your sort of log analysis, your petrophysical log analysis that gives you some of those things that everybody's got. And, you need to know your gas gravity, oil gravity. You might know your bubble point or dew point or that sort of thing. And so at we'll call it really basic understanding of the geology and that production data. And from that, you can build straight line analysis techniques, XY plots, this against that, draw a straight line through the data. Engineers like straight lines. So you manipulate time functions and, in order to turn the data straight so you can learn something about what's going on. And those things that you learn are properties that you may have heard about, like the permeability, which is a transport characteristic of the rock, like how much does that oil and gas flow in the ground? How easily or not easily does it flow? You'll hear completions engineers, which are probably the biggest following of the Coldbore community, I imagine. The most famous time plot that they would use would be a square root time plot. That's for the analysis of the early sort of flow regime that you would get from a flowing well that's been fractured, like a multi-fract horizontal, for example. And that gives you an understanding of the permeability and the fracture area you've created from your stimulation. So that's one of the deliverables of RTA. There's lots, but as I connect it to the frac community, the frac crowd, these are the things they want to know. When I pump a big frac, how well, I get to see the rates, but how much is that influenced by the permeability of the reservoir? How much is that the fracture area I've created by doing my job properly? RTA can sort of disseminate that, dissect that a little bit by having a well on longer. The longer it produces, the more sort of you can read into the reservoir. And you can start to figure out things like fracture properties and rock properties. And so it's a very cool science, and that's why it's been adopted across industry for conventional and unconventional reservoirs. When I started, it was all conventional reservoirs, and that was my theory. And then I got thrown into shale gas, and it was like all things went to hell. And it's like, the techniques weren't built for that. Now they quickly developed during the time that I was at FCAD, and other players in the space were developing techniques too. And I don't know, it was just a really great time, exciting time, really fortunate that I started at that time, because all you really needed at that time was a good memory and get on airplanes and meet with lots of smart people at all the E&Ps, because you just sit there and as long as you knew incrementally 1 ounce more than the next guy, they call you the expert, which was funny because nobody was an expert. But it was just right time, right place, right company, right, and great culture. That company is unrivaled. Like, I don't think there'll ever be an equal in terms of the culture that they created of, being technically up to speed. There was a lot of incentive to like write papers and to read papers and to be technically competent. And I've never seen its equal in industry.
So going back to some of the things that you talked about regarding rate RTA and understanding the reservoir, and excuse my ignorance, because I'm very familiar with drilling.
Yeah.
I'm passingly familiar with completions. I have no understanding of production or evaluation on the production side.
Sure.
So I'm a E&P. I go out and I drill a pilot well or discovery well, I would guess, and produce that well for a period of time. We'd run an RTA against the data of the production, and then that should dictate whether it's valuable to go and keep drilling in that area. How directly applicable would the RTA of well 1 be against the drilling and completions procedures for well 2?
So that's a good question. So what RTA can provide is earlier insights about what's going on. If all you're looking at is right off a wellhead, I mean, you can watch the show, Landman, as we probably all have, and you can say, look at that's up to 150 barrels per day or whatever, like we're making money. Like, that's useful, and that'll tell you that, hey, we should probably drill more wells here or whatever. But what RTA can give you is a deeper understanding of what's driving that performance. Like what specifically in the reservoir is causing that well to hit that rate. It's what is often referred to as reservoir characterization. And that's when you start to understand and sort of decouple the contributions from your frac, from your stimulation on the completion side, and what God gave you in the ground, for whatever that expression is, the permeability, the pressures, the porosity, all the things that were there to begin with. So some of this stuff, like, with shale, it's locked up. You're not getting that out unless you do a multi-fract horizontal well. It's not going to be economic. And, congratulations to, the pioneers of multi-fract horizontals and getting it all out. And anyway, like, just to connect it to RTA again, it's an investigation of, the performance drivers. And so if you understand that, and you can understand what's driving what, of course you can optimize how to do your development program. So if the weakest link in the chain is something that you better understand, then you know how to address that. So you can't do that from rate-time relationships alone when you're looking at production data. That rate, pressure, time dance in the context of geology and fluid properties, that's when you can start really, in a practical way, in a pragmatic way, that's when you can really start to optimize your development planning.
Gotcha.
Now, you can do more detail than RTA. RTA is just what I call a practical sort of, and I said pragmatic way of doing it, because you can do it fairly quickly. But if you really want to go nuts, you probably heard about production simulation and companies like CMG and, SLB has got their suite of tools like Kinetics and, everything else. Like, these are the guys that are handcuffed to their computers and they're just doing history matching routines through that production data. And they're just spending an enormous amount of time integrating with other disparate sources of oil field data, other sciences, and doing these holistic integrated reservoir studies. Those things can take months. And that's the Cadillac. Like, if you want to go all the way, RTA is sort of, it's a middle of the road sort of amount of work for the deliverables that you get. And for a lot of operators, especially those mid-sized ones with lots of wells to analyze, that's its fit for purpose. It's got a nice home there of maybe you can do RTA 2, 3, 4 wells a day. So if you got 100 wells, do the math, it's like I can get through that in a month.
Yeah.
So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very
I don't know, does that make sense?
It opens the door at least. What are some myths or most unknown things about RTA? Like what do people believe but aren't true, or don't know about how it would help you?
Sure. Like some people think that there's environments that are too complex for the science to be deployed. So it could be that, everything in the kitchen sink. It's multi-phase flow. It's got oil, gas, and water. It's a saturated reservoir, meaning as soon as you turn the well onto production, you're below the saturation pressure and you're evolving gas or evolving condensate from gas. And, it's stress-sensitive reservoir, and there's geomechanics at play. And, it's too simplistic of a view of the completion geometry because your models are using just uniform fractures. They're all the same size and they're all the same length. And in reality, we know that's not the case. So the idea here is that RTA is creating models that are physical models, but they're functional models. They're useful models. And you guys have probably heard the expression, all models are wrong, some models are useful. Well, and for 15 years running this stupid thing, and I'm essentially a man who owns a hammer, and I just hammer things every day. I know what it can do, and I know what it can't. And a lot of people think it can't do things that it absolutely can't do. And sometimes these simple models do provide great insights. But if I was going to use an RTA model for well spacing optimization in not a green field, but a well-developed field where you're doing infill wells, and geomechanics are a really big deal. You've heard about pressure sinks where a child well or an infill well does its frac and it chases that pressure sink from the old parent well that's been on production.
Yeah.
So you don't, the distribution of your fracture geometry isn't what you planned it to be. And there's all these other complexities from depletion and geomechanics. Well, is RTA good for that? Not as a predicting tool. As a post-mortem tool, sure. Look back, no problem. An autopsy, terrific. As a predictive tool in that environment, not very reliable. So there are limitations, and that's when I'd call my buddy Mark McClure at ResFrac. You may have heard of those guys. They're really focused on that problem. And other vendors that are more on the surveillance and diagnostics of these things, I think Mark McTarley was in this chair, RevSolves, right? They're really focused on the dynamics of the parent-child well interactions and, looking at those rogue runaway fracs that are caused by pressure sinks and, being able to detect, mitigate, optimize those development programs. So there's a lot of vendors in the space that are tackling the things where RTA is limited and RTA can't be sort of extended into that area, rightfully so. But there's some smart guys that are building software tools to sort of, address that very complicated problem.
So bringing this back just a little bit. So if I have 2 wells that have been producing for a while, they've been producing very well, and I think, hey, I want to drill a well in the middle, so maybe we can get a little bit more production. And then after the fact, you look and you see the production of all 3 is actually less than the 2 we're producing. RTA would give us some perspective on why or on what happened, but not predict that it can happen.
Well, first of all, I've never seen an infill well where you add a 3rd well cause a loss of the aggregate of all 3. I've seen it knock a parent well a little offline or, interfere with it and drop its production. But just to be clear, if you add another well, it's not like the overall total of production goes down. But there's a little steal from Paul to pay Peter or whatever the expression is, Can RTA be used to, understand what that well did to the parents? And yeah, of course, and try to distribute how that damage occurred or how that interference, I guess you would say, production interference occurred? Absolutely. Not perfectly, but in a useful manner, yeah.
But not in predictive, not saying
no,
would like to drill.
I don't know. RTA in those complex environments, the only way I could say it could be semi-useful in a predictive capacity is if you performed RTA in those environments countless times over and you've learned something from those exercises. In that sense, you can sort of use it in a predictive way, but it's not like you can calibrate, the stress considerations from one pad to another pad are not the same because you're never duplicating things identically. And even if you did the same well designs, the same landing depths, the same completions, exactly, which you don't do. But if you could, there's still geological variations and differences. There'll be stress differences. There's saturation differences in situ. So the hardest thing to do in oil and gas, as a reservoir engineer, is to learn, say, a drilling spacing unit or a pad really well, and then with all the jewelry, all the diagnostics and all the jazz, and translate those learnings to the next pad to optimize it. Because as soon as you go to that next pad or next unit,
everything's different.
It's so different. And they can't, they just, as much as it's a controlled experiment and they try to like control variables, it's impossible. Like there's just too many things. But we do our best efforts to try to do that exactly. So it's hard.
And how has it changed over, you've been doing that for 10 years prior to Saga even.
Yeah.
How have you seen rate transient change in the industry and maybe lead to like what's novel about the paper that you're writing now and going on tour with?
Oh, sure. Well, a lot of the new vendors, like Whitson is an example of one. I mean, I worked at Ficat that became iChess that was merged with Market, and then it was iChess Market, now it's S&P Global, and there's always a bigger fish. But so like a lot of the developers of these companies that I used to work at, my alma mater and others, and there's Kappa and Whitson and, you know, a host of others, these people are advancing the automation of a lot of these tools. So they're trying to make, I mean, what do you do as a technology vendor? Even at Coldbore, like I assume you're trying to do something better, you're trying to do it faster, right?
Yeah.
And money is, like, time is money. So a lot of what the vendors are doing are accelerating the workflows so that we can analyze more wells for the same amount of time.
Yeah.
You know, and I see, you know, outfits like Whitson that can do this. They can calculate bottom hole pressures from surface data across hundreds of wells, lickety split, with rigorous sort of PVT, you know, calculations involved, like equations of state and the rest. Like, it's kind of miraculous how advanced. Then you get into computational efficiencies. Mm-hmm. You know, when I started, like the speed at which you'd run a simulation or a model would be a long time if it's multi-phase and complex. I'd sit there teaching workshops, and I'd have to sit there for half an hour in front of people trying to make this dancing history match work, where you're putting your model curves through the data and saying, hey, look, this looks like it's a permissible solution. But now it's like, holy cow, like these things go so fast. So, and especially in the last 5 years. So those are the advancements of RTA and industry. It's speed, mostly.
Yeah.
It's not so much new models, new techniques, it's just fast.
Yeah.
Although there are some advancements in terms of like different, we'll call it techniques and interpretations of what we're doing, but I don't consider those as considerable as the efficiency gains. And sorry, what was the other question?
Oh yeah, the lead to, like, I guess your paper and
right.
and going on tour with this, and maybe
Sure.
what's novel in this paper or new ideas that you're bringing forward there.
Sure. Well, first off, I'll say it's not a paper.
Okay.
It's a slide deck, and it's I don't know if you've heard of, you guys know the Society of Petroleum Engineers for sure, right? Yeah. In fact, Saga, our company, shares the office suite with the SPE International here in Calgary. And we are going to continue to do that because we're moving together again in a month because they're converting our commercial building to condos. So, but what this is a distinguished lecturer tour. So it's a long process from beginning to end. Somebody nominates you, they hear you talk, they're like, hey, you could be a distinguished lecturer. And what that means is you put together a title and an abstract, you throw in your bio. If they like it, and the judges like it, or the committee likes it, you go down. I went to the ATC in New Orleans, and I gave this presentation, which was rate transient analysis, not for reservoir engineers who use it all the time, but for production engineers. How to identify wells that have uplift opportunities, like low-hanging fruit, production optimization, call it. How RTA can be used as a screening tool to upgrade wells that could be workover candidates, or wells that could be, you know, more effectively operated to get better production, right? So that's what the talk is about. Fortunately, I presented to the committee. I got the green light. I got appointed as a DL just last month, or a little bit more than that. And what that means is in 2025 and 2026, I'm traveling over the world, 3 2-week stints where, you know, I'll probably hit North America for a couple weeks through all the various cities. You kind of wake up, you're in a different city every day. You give the same talk over and over and over and over again, or some variation of. I don't know where I'm going to go. It could be, you know, you can cross out the countries you don't want to go to.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a few of those. But you know, hopefully I get to go to some sections in Europe. I think there's like 260 SBE chapters out there. So, like, I'm going to cross out a whole bunch, but I'm crossing my fingers I get to go to Europe. But, you know, Australia, Asia, wherever. Mm-hmm. So it's like 2 weeks, come back, you know, wait for a bit. You go out again for another 2 weeks, come back, go out for another 2 weeks. I don't expect to see too much. I expect to just wake up, like talk, go on another airplane.
So. That's exciting. Well, congrats on getting through and
appreciate that.
Exciting next year. So is production engineers like using the RTA for production optimization? Is that do you know of many companies doing this already, or that's pretty new?
No, I think there are. I mean, we've been trying to, hammer on this drum for a while. The guy who first put this idea in my head was, I don't even know where I was. I think it was at NCS Multistage, working under the umbrella that Dave and I had, like Anderson Thompson Reservoir Strategies, which is like a business unit of a tool company that you guys are probably familiar with. They're known for coiled tubing, actuated sliding sleeves, and tracers and some other things. So, but he called me, Mike Dembicki, and he's a GP boy. He was 7 generations, right? And I think he's CNRL now. But he had said, John, I need a workshop RTA for production engineers. And he put the seed in my brain, and I was like, you guys should really do this. And I thought, yeah, you're right. I mean, look at all the utility and applications for RTA for their problems that they need help with, but they don't even know. They're intimidated by history matching and models and RTA and reservoir speak. But they shouldn't be, because they work in integrated asset teams with completions, production, reservoir engineers, some G&G sprinkled in. These guys can speak, at least a little bit into some reservoir jargon. And I think the resistance is that they're too busy, for one, and they were thinking, oh, this is too complicated. But it's not hard if you've got a teacher who knows how to explain it. And as I mentioned about the efficiency gains, it doesn't take as long as it used to.
Yeah.
And so fit for purpose, it's like, I'm a production engineer. I'm managing, 100 wells in the field. It's like my boss says, give me 5 of these wells that we should work over or that we should investigate to see if we can get a little bit more oil and gas out of them. RTA is perfect for that application. So if you see inconsistencies in the rate pressure response, RTA can really quantify that inconsistency and the potential of resolving that. So there could be something in the well. There could be something in the ground, like sand. That's common, right?
Yeah.
Like a sand cleanout.
We pump it downhole.
Right. We pump it downhole, and sometimes it gets left in the lateral section. And we think it's clean, but it's not. And so you think your well is healthy, but it's not. And so what RTA can do is diagnose the health of your well. And it can say, this is unhealthy. I don't know what's causing it. I don't know what's wrong with it, but there's something wrong. So you could call Frank in town who works for EV Downhole Cam, and you'd say, hey, Frank, I need a camera. And you'll say, it'll be 40, 50,000, and we'll take a look. Then you'll see all the sand. Then you're going to schedule a sand clean out, a workover. There's a couple $100,000. So I'm going to spend $250,000 on this well, but RTA tells me if I can remove that blockage, I could get, accelerated reserves recovery up to $1 million in net present value. Now, is that worth the $250,000 investment? Absolutely. So, this is just, I'm trying to give you some specifics about how you could do it, and so if I'm an RTA, if I'm a production engineer, I'm already got this feel that this well's unhealthy, so I need a science to kind of look at it a little bit more to justify getting the camera, diagnosing that well, taking a look at it, making sure it's something that we could remediate.
That's fantastic. I think that really put it into a nice box with a bow on it.
Yeah, I think it's a good transition. So if someone's interested, where do they learn more about your RTA?
Oh yeah, well, all the vendors of the service providers of the software tools are good. Of course, anybody can feel free to call me if they're interested in RTA. I love talking about it, as you guys can tell. But the main outfits, as I mentioned, S&P Global and Kappa and Whitson, they're sort of the top dogs.
Gotcha. And they can find you on one of the SPE presentations and catch you there.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, if anybody sees me running around doing my distinguished lecturer dance, that they show up for it. That'd be great. I'd appreciate the support.
Fantastic.
And is your lecture, is this in the Saga Wisdom courses that's available for everything on RTAs that's in
No,
that's
it's
in your guys'
not.
platform yet?
It's not. It's usually the Dave Anderson show on there.
Oh, okay.
And we've got our friends like Hamid Beminesh, who's like a remarkably competent RTA practitioner. and mathematician who's featured on the platform. Dylan Lougheed, our CEO, has a course on, we'll call it well test analysis, pressure transient analysis for unconventionals, and that's sort of like RTA but upside down. So without getting into it, it's pretty much the same stuff. And I've got little clips of myself, like reviewing RTA papers, but I'm not teaching anything. I don't think this DL deck will go there because I guess it's SP copyright now. So,
Oh wow, that's right.
They're gonna own it. So
transitioning over. Thanks, Derek, for the smooth handoff. Tell us a little bit about Saga Wisdom. What's it about? What's its mission? Why Saga Wisdom?
Well, I'd mentioned I was a teacher of RTA, but also a student as well, right? We're all students first. And, I'm sitting at the bar with my buddy Darcy Fairbrother, because we're all working at NCS Multistage at the time. It's circa 2016-17. And we're kind of complaining about like how crappy, training and education is in our industry, because it's still like archaic. Like it's like find that smart person, fly him out to another city, set up a workshop, have everybody come out for it. You've got hotels and flights and everybody's got to show up. And, that's how training is being done historically in our industry and in a lot of industries. And at that time, and this is pre-COVID, guys, like it was sort of like, how can we do this scalable, better, only the best, not like tier 2, tier 3 guys and girls, like just the best.
I mean, affordable.
Affordable. Well, yeah, so we were inspired by Masterclass. That are the best at what they do, scaled to the masses. So it'd be like Ron Howard teaches you directing or Sam Jackson teaches you acting. And we're like, well, what if the technical authorities of our industry could be those people? And what if we could provide like a Netflix-like subscription model to it? And we thought, that's great. And Darcy's point was like, hey, I never got training when I was at a company. I guess I wasn't important enough. Like, wouldn't it be nice if our solution provided training to everybody, a B2B or a B2 enterprise type solution where we're essentially, online training, but we're giving it as part of the subscription to the company, everybody in the company. So the people that are the junior resources or the people who would never be given budget for learning, our model's going to give it to them. So we don't sell courses a la carte, and we don't say, this guy is going to ask his manager for this course on Saga. It doesn't work that way. What we say is, get with our corporate deals, everybody has access to all of the courses all the time, anytime, anywhere, on demand. And so what's useful about that is that the management teams at some of these companies get to tell their personnel, hey, I know we've never invested in your development for your career ever before, and the implicit messages, because maybe you're not important enough, but I have a solution now where you can pull a full Goodwill Hunting and be Matt Damon in that movie and just read all the books and take all the courses, and you can advance your career if you're motivated. I'm giving you the tools to do it. So it's on you now. So I really like that about our subscription model. And and like I said, I mean, thanks to Darcy for doing that. And so really it was Darcy, Dave Anderson, myself, and Dylan Lougheed around drinking tables conceptualizing this model. And there's some other guys involved at the beginning that since exited. But we've been in the market since January of 2019. And we had an MVP platform with one course. Guess what? RTA.
Nice.
By Dave Anderson. and now we got 75 courses out. And,
what's the average length of a course?
It varies. It can be anywhere from like 2.5, 3 hours to about 20 hours. You get to 20 hours of recorded time. That's like university comprehensive level. Like,
Yeah.
it's like 40 hours of lecturing. Well, this is all recorded. So it translates to be about that. So our customers, by the way, sort of like the 4 to 6 hour sweet spot. And so does a PEGA. Actually, speaking of which, if you want to keep your P-Eng and PGO, you got to do continuing education and training.
Yeah.
Or, to keep your professional status. Well, as of this year in Alberta, you can do self-directed learning. So if you want to take a course on Coursera or Udemy, and you've heard of these platforms probably for learning, LinkedIn Learning, you can take Saga. So it's a huge opportunity for our customers and for ourselves that we're now going to be a really big driver of people keeping their professional designations as P-Eng, PGO. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's kicking in next month. So that's really great.
So is there a course that you particularly like, or something that stands out for you that you watched and you participated in?
You mean on our platform?
Yes.
Oh gosh. There's certain instructors that I think are Mozart when they speak. Chris Clarkson is one that comes to mind. I mean, I think Anderson and Lougheed are my business partners, so I'm way too biased to promote them, although theirs are excellent. But Clarkson is freaking Mozart. Like, that guy doesn't miss a beat. You guys are in the business of, producing content and going to Frame.io and editing that and getting it out. You guys would love Clarkson because he doesn't make a mistake. It's like there's no gaps. It's so articulate, and he's probably I've often called him one of Canada's, if not like best petroleum engineer, because he's got the industry background. He's not just a pure academic. He understands the practical nature of these sciences and why it's useful, and so he's on our platform doing flowback analysis and tight rock core analysis, and he's going to be doing RTA as well, because we don't believe in one voice for science. We want to get multiple perspectives, and so if somebody's going there and you want a masterclass course, he's like one of my favorites. But of course, there's a whole bunch.
And what was it like trying to recruit other talented experts in the field, trying to get them to come on camera, and maybe some are, not quite as easy and smooth at it, and trying to train them up and to get them to, get a masterclass level lecture out of them?
I love that question. So it was both easy and hard at the beginning, and let me explain why. So it was, and this is a lot of fun. So it was really hard because you've got a concept of a model of a company, but you've got one course with one guy, and I'm trying to, get other, super important people that the best in the world. And they're like, it's one thing to say, look at my platform now, I got 75 top instructors. Look at all my customers. It's easy to pitch it now. It's like, if I want you, there's a good chance I'm going to get you now. It wasn't that way. But so that was the hard part back then. The easy part, guys, remember what it was like in 2020, COVID?
Yeah.
Nobody was working, minus $37 a barrel oil.
Yeah.
So I had all these smart people, and they weren't doing anything because industry came to a creeping halt. Remember, we shut in all those wells, and, oil's not worth anything. And curtailment. So guess what? You had a lot of smart people, and I had the serendipity of that downturn to say, come in our studio. It looks like you're not doing too much consulting right now. So that was a really serendipitous opportunity for Saga, and that's when we started putting our head down and getting a lot of content. So we didn't have a lot of revenue. Mm-hmm. Customers didn't have money. We were just getting going, and you'd think, oh, horrible timing to start a company. So we debt financed a bit to get through to the other side. That's how we did it. We didn't sell shares, and we did get through the other side. And meanwhile, we got 6, 7, 8 courses by the time we're starting to pull through the industry, the downturn. And now we're rocking and rolling now. So now but yeah, we had some hard times in there.
That is fantastic. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to dig in and have a look at some courses.
Yeah.
Great.
What kind of engagement, if you're able to share with when you get a client, and how many of their employees they get in there? Like, do you have an average, hours that people will take in lectures or anything you share there?
Yeah. So that's the beauty of a digital platform, is you've got granular analytics. So like the dashboards and the plots and the transparency of like where all the clicks are going. Of course, we need to know where all the clicks are going. We actually compensate our trainers based on like lessons accessed, and that's how they get compensated. So, but the HR, training coordinators, managers, and the people themselves that have their own profiles, they want to know where their time is being spent. And it's super interesting because you think that they're going to go to these courses, but they go to these other courses. And, never in industry have they had that level of analytics. Like they've got learning management systems, but people are taking their trainings all over the place. Mm-hmm. Ours is all in one shop. So we can show where the time is being spent. And it's what incredible business intelligence to know that. And then, if the company doesn't like where all their people are clicking, they can literally create these, we call them cohorts, these groups of learners, and force them into the subjects that are more aligned with the business objectives of their companies. Now, as far as like how are people adopting online learning, I guess is the beginning of your question. It varies, and it's a challenge. Because the strength and the weakness of any online training is that you can do it anytime. What an opportunity. But it's also a problem because you can do it anytime.
Yeah, professional procrastinators.
Procrastinators, I'll do it next week, I'll do it next month, and I'm guilty too. So, I have all these ambitions about the courses I'm going to take on our platform, and I don't do them because, like, I'm swamped. And that's the same with engineers and geologists. So that's hard. So a lot of the features that we put in the platform are to address that problem.
Do you do any live lecturing? Have you guys considered that at all? Like kind of joining onto that and be like, we can do it in class for specific ones if clients, really pushed for that?
So like Dave and I, we flew to Madrid to teach Repsol RTA, 25 engineers. And at the end, we left them with the keys to the platform so they could take the online stuff. In that sense, it's a hybrid offering.
Yeah.
There's a live physical in-person piece. And when we leave, everything we've told you is on the platform. You've seen it. You've had your chance to have that engagement. We'll do that. We can also, as people are, say, taking like the online course as a group, say a cohort, as I mentioned, at a company, well, halfway through the course, we can stop, create a Zoom or a Teams meeting, inject the live instructor virtually, but live, and then they have a chance to ask Q&A. So we don't believe in all asynchronous pre-recorded. We believe in those touch points with instructor to student. So that they feel that they can ask their questions, but also for the trainer's side, a lot of these people are selling things like SaaS products, consultancies, joint industry projects, consortia. So they want to get
markets them out
markets
there.
them.
Yeah.
Like, I want your email addresses. I want to know who's taken my courses, and I'm going to do some follow-up, marketing. And so we do that. It's added value for the student, but it's added value for the trainer, because you get the odd, like, older guy who's like looking at retirement and isn't looking at, trying to sell anything anymore. They just love teaching. But a lot of the personality profiles that are, interested in Saga are like, wait, you're going to pay me to do my marketing and business development?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, we're going to pay you money, and we're going to get out there and we're going to like drive your consultancy by creating this trusted advisor status for you to all of our customers, and we're going to pay you for the privilege. So it's kind of an easy sell.
Yeah, that's a great win-win, right? It's easy to get, you're saying easy to bring in good talent when those are the incentives, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not a fit for everybody, but it's a heck of a pitch for anybody who's trying to, leverage our users. By the way, we've got like 10,000 users now, which are all like primarily subsurface technical professionals. I mentioned people in engineering and geosciences, but there's admin, there's management leaders and whatnot. But that's across like 60 corporate subscriptions and a few like one-offs.
And how much, you said you went to Madrid, how much is in North America? Like, do you see your platform expanding into Europe a bit and into other areas?
Not as much as I'd like. So that's all about 2025. That's on my hope chest.
Nice.
Is a lot more traction in the international market. Because if you think about it, for those people working the unconventionals, especially where a lot of our content is aligned, but like other things, it's like the real opportunities are national oil companies, international oil companies overseas, because you're taking all these North American experts that they want to fly out, and it's like, here it is in a box, perfect. So I think that's the real opportunity for us, and that means we've got to meet some of the content needs that are more aligned with, say, Norway, deep water, offshore, those types of trainings.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited about that. But domestically, and I mean domestic as U.S., Canada, it's incredible. Like, I couldn't be more thrilled with the traction that we've created over the last 5 years. We've got all the top logos, save, like an EOG, because they don't really want to talk to too many people or share, but and a few others, but like we, the Chevrons, and we're in with Exxon, and you got Marathon's of course acquired, but like Devon and et cetera. I could go down the list, like, and there's a few out there that we haven't yet landed, but we're making our game plan now here in December to get whatever's left over. So
that's amazing. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Do you see, like, with those even domestic or international, like, saying there's a gap in some content, especially like offshore? Are you seeing gaps with the current list of clients you have? They're pushing a lot. You have 75 courses now. Are they saying you need another 75? Or
yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, 75 doesn't comprehensively cover it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you start getting into hundreds of courses, and I'd like to think at that point we will, and that's our goal, hundreds of courses. 75 is like, we're really proud of, like, again, really proud about how fast we can generate high quality course material, but we have a roadmap left to finish, and there are absolutely gaps in production engineering, completions engineering, even reservoir, where we have a lot of strength. Obviously, it's like we have gaps, and so my job is almost like a nurse in a hospital. I'm a triage nurse, so I don't have to like beg on my hands and knees trying to get experts to come. They're coming. So now it's more saying, the uncomfortable part is saying no. Now
Yeah.
it's like, no, I need to prioritize this course because this matters more for our current customers or our prospective customers internationally.
Yeah.
I don't like saying no. I'm not a no person, but that's the job now.
That's a good position to be in.
It is. It is.
John, do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Where the heck did Coldbore's name come from?
Actually, it's a super cute little snip. So Coldbore's history was to create a directional communications device, a directional telemetry module for acoustic. And the idea was that we could talk 56,000 bits per second from downhole to surface during drilling. At the time, and this is mid 2010, something like that, 2012. At the time, 1 to 10 bits a second from downhole to surface was pretty common, and you had a couple of technological outliers sitting in the 20 bits a second. So we figured 56,000 would be a good number. The gentlemen who were part of the original technology for Coldbore, they're ex-Nortel folk, and they have a lot of transmitting data through air patents, or their names are on a lot of the patents, as they told us. I never looked into it, but so they said they could mimic fax modem type speeds, and actually it's really neat because when we had our original tool downhole sending data, it on the surface of the drilling rig, it sounded like there was a fax modem, bing boom bing, and it was making those sounds, and you could hear it just everywhere. It was fantastic. But the idea of Coldbore is the first shot out of a rifle. Now it's really neat because I've spoken with a lot of people who shoot guns, and the question is, is your first shot the most accurate? Do you do a couple of warm-up shots and then you have some consistency after the fact? I'm not going to say that the data is perfect, but the intention behind the name Coldbore is when you start with a truly cold bore, your first shot is the most precise. So that's the idea, is when we're drilling a well, Coldbore comes in and gives you the most precision to your well drilling.
And are you guys still doing that with these tools?
No.
I didn't think so. I never think about this with Coldbore. I think of like, a central repository of disparate sources of completions data that would be synchronized so that they all have the same timestamp, and then you'd send those either through an API or sort of downstream to somebody who's going to do something with said data. Is that that's my understanding?
That's right. So the flow, the corporate flow for Coldbore is we went out and we did a lot of evaluations of downhole environments using our tool, and we still have all of the tools and the technology, but it was I'm going to say around 2015, inaccurately, it was around 2015 when we had a dip in the oil field. And the question was, well, we have not a lot of wells drilling, but we have a lot of wells waiting production. How can we apply our technology to the completion side, or waiting for completions? So one of our company that we were working with at the time at Rapid Design there was a question, can you hear what's happening downhole with your technology? So we took our fancy developed active noise reduction or adaptive noise reduction technology from the rig floor, and we clipped that onto coil, and we clipped that onto completions jobs to hear a ball drop, collet drop, etc. And we
listening for darts.
and we nailed it.
Yeah.
The
To
first one
find
was
their home.
just beautiful.
Yeah, and so that's part of you're offering now that you guys are doing, it's like acoustics based.
That's right.
You essentially have got like these things on people's ears,
Yeah.
listening,
That's exactly right.
listening for a whistle.
That's more
like to go
that's like a smaller product line, but the main part is kind of what you're saying, that central repository, bringing all the data in on site, digitizing the wellhead, automating the time log and the stage reporting, and just making, like you were kind of talking about earlier, about like making data and all these things just work faster, more consistently, more efficiently,
Yeah.
and arm the engineers with the tools and the data they need so they can do other things
Yeah,
with
and
them
more
and learn
seamless
more.
integration with the people you want to integrate with.
Absolutely.
That's right.
So I've heard, okay, so we've mentioned some of my buddies at some of the founders of these technology companies that are Calgary based largely, and I keep hearing stories that they're, maybe API is not the expression, but like they're connecting to the data that you're providing to them. And you know, I've heard of Prepad recently, I think with Birchcliff. I've heard of Shearfrac Group with operators that shall remain nameless, because it's always
Always
top
hush-hush.
secret with
That's
these
right.
guys. Mark McTarley, I believe, is somehow, you know, with RevSolves is maybe connected with your data. I'm not sure, but like, so you guys are working with a lot of the vendors that are interested in the data that you guys are collecting and synchronizing and organizing, and I'm hearing that those integrations are seamless and, you know, remarkably smooth. I wish you know, that's not my bag. That's not my game as an engineer, but like, I don't know, maybe I'm on the downstream side of where that data is going as well. So right now you guys are all completions, right? Is how I think of you guys.
Yeah.
Either listening for darts or finding stages and isolating those, or, you know, just giving people completion data. But have you guys ever thought about sort of, you know, diversifying your service offering to also include, you know, not just real-time completion data, but like real-time, you know, I don't know, production or something a little bit more downstream from the frac?
I think not like seriously. I think we've had a few ideas bounce around, but I don't think we've really seriously looked at it or really seriously talked with operators about what challenges live in there. But I think the more as we really get a good grasp on the completion side, and like you're saying, like, yeah, we've connected to RevSolves, Shearfrac, Prepad, and it's pretty smooth. Like it's getting a lot, and it's getting even smoother by the day, basically. But not a lot of work from our side. Like our system's kind of built; it just kind of does it now.
Yeah.
And so I think I'd be interested in exploring a bit more on like, well, do these problems still even exist on the production side? Is the production similar to where completion was when we were getting into it? Is there challenges like this that exist that we could, you know, simplify and make things a bit smoother?
Yeah, right. Well, I'm thinking about, as I think downstream, and I think about people that are more focused on the production, the real-time production, the real-time completion, I think about vendors like, well, on the artificial lift automation front, I think of Ambient, maybe Medalla software falls into that bucket for production. I think about flowback real-time with, you know, Revo testing technologies, and they're trying to use, you know, reservoir engineering techniques to figure out, you know, how to flow back wells and do that in an optimal way to keep the fracture properties as good as you can keep them, as conductive as possible, as long as possible. And I'm just thinking, like, with all of the magic and infrastructure that you guys have for fracking and completions, it's like, you know, like, do any of those things translate or could be made to translate into, you know, monitoring gauges and doing like sort of the same dance, but for production? And I don't even know if that even makes sense, but I don't know. What does your R&D tech discussions look like in a boardroom for the things that you want to do the next? What is the future of Coldbore, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there's like the future, the known future, and the unknown. There's lots of, you know, secret stuff that we're thinking about and might expand into. But in the known, right, is being that, continuing to be that central place on the completion. So there's still work to be done in that, and being able to more efficient, you know, and work with. We're seeing service companies that have more data available than they have in the past, like looking at sand and fuel. There's a lot of things going on in emissions reporting now. So really want to be that place where all the completions data comes through us, and we, you know, centralize everything, timestamp it, automate all this reporting, and, you know, make that process very simple for the operator, so they can come in and say, okay, are we doing these things the most efficiently? How else can we look at this? So there's still work to be done.
Yeah, you said a key word there, emissions reporting. That's going to be potentially big, like really important. As I understand it, and I might have the date wrong, but I want to say March of this upcoming year, like in a few months, the emissions fines, the methane fines are going to be levied. And that's when operators are going to have to open up their pocketbooks and start paying some hefty fines. And when that happens, then I don't know if that's more of a Biden administration or what's going to happen in the new, the Trump
new
president,
regime.
the new regime. But they're not, whatever 2025 isn't changing. I think I can confidently say that. So people are still, let's just face it, like people are still thinking about responsible development of resources and lowering emissions, irrespective of who the political party is in charge in the cabinet. But emissions is big, and like because of that, as my company is trying to be forward thinking and recognize we're not wisdom in oil and gas, we're wisdom in energy and all things relating to energy. And emissions is like we're very, we're forecasting the importance of methane education and emissions management training as being really paramount to oil and gas operators in Canada and the US. And because of that, we formed a strategic partnership with Highwood Emissions Management. They're Calgary-based, but all their customers are U.S.-based and U.S. operators for the most part. And we got 5 courses in clean energy on our platform that are really focused on emissions, with another few in the hopper that are to come, because we're sort of predicting that this is going to become really important education and training. So we sort of got in front of that by reaching out to who we thought the best in the world were, and it just so happens that they're neighbors. So like that's, I think these conversations, like if Coldbore is looking at doing things more on the sort of the emissions front as a general category, I think that's some forward thinking.
So first, sign up to Saga Wisdom and make sure all of our guys follow the Highwood Emissions Management Education Seminars.
I would say so, yeah. Jennifer Schumlich and Thomas Fox, and there's a host of others that are on their platform that are their technical experts. And at a very minimum, start with sort of the 101, of like emissions. What is it? Why should you care? Like the basics. That's something I need to do myself, actually.
Awesome.
That makes sense. I think that's a smart and a safe bet, right? Like clearly this is going to be something that's discussed from now until, throughout this industry and in energy in general. Like this is not going away.
No.
There's cities now are installing permanent methane emissions monitoring in their landfills to monitor these ongoing. So even in landfills and these things, like this is going to continue, right? So
there's funny memes out there too about slaughtering cows because cows poop make a lot of emissions. So we got to save the planet. So kill all the cows.
That's the argument against vegetarianism is I eat the cows. Like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
all the vegans are coming after us now.
That's right.
I'm sure they liked our oil and gas podcast to begin with.
Yeah. So, so on the lighter side, what do we have for the meme of the day?
Is this the underwater video fishing system?
Yes.
Yeah. Spoilers.
This is electrical fishing line. We call this E-line. This is fishing line that's also a data cable. And the reason we invented this is that the wireless transmission of data in an underwater environment is nearly impossible. So if you want to send lots of data through the water, the only way to do it is with a wired connection like this E-line. And what it lets us do is put a camera on the end of it. We can take real-time video from the camera, send it up the E-line to your phone so you can watch what's happening live as you fish. You can see your bait, you can see the underwater environment. And right now, we're running an equity crowdfunding campaign. You can buy shares in RealView Fishing. You become an investor, and our campaign is closing very soon. We've got about a week left. Check it out, and I hope you'll join us.
We talk about getting data from downhole. We talk about getting data from different places and how it kind of transforms what you're doing. A friend of mine, he once said, if you have no data, providing a little data will change the process. If you have a little data and getting a lot of data, it's questionable. It's murky. I think about the range finders and the fishing finders, and then I watch the videos of these guys, and you can see a fish actually nibble on your bait or a fish actually striking the hook in near real time. I thought that was perfect for some nerd reactions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's just call it what it is. It's cheating. So like, I think that takes a lot. Like, I'm no angler. I mean, I did, go on fishing boats with my dad in Ontario and Lake Ontario for growing up with good memories. But like, so I'm not the right guy because I'm not, a sportsman or a sports fisherman. But I don't know, like a lot of the enjoyment for me was not having all the cheating tools to know. I don't even like these apps that tell you where the schools of fishes are. I mean, at least I sort of get that a bit, but what you're describing, what these guys are doing sounds more like a video game, right? Like it sounds like a VR headset game, and I see my,
Yeah.
I'm gonna put the bait and the hook exactly in the fish's mouth and just wait. It sounds like Animal Crossing on the Nintendo Switch. Like, I don't know. It's at what
ruins
point?
the joy?
Yeah, don't you think a little bit? But like from a technology innovation perspective, I mean, pretty cool. But yeah, like. I guess if you're trying to get the most fish, and it's like getting the most oil and gas out of the ground, right?
Yeah, it's
like,
exactly.
If that's the point, good job. But like, are you trying to deplete the ocean of all the fishes? Like, if that's the case, hand clap.
Boom,
But,
nailed it.
yeah, so
That's funny. That's a good take. Yeah. At what point do you just go to the supermarket and pick your fish out of the fish tank?
that's right.
That's right. Boom, look what
That's
I
right.
caught. Lobster today.
That's right. Surprise. Yeah. You actually pick out the fish you want to eat for the night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm excited for Niantic to come out with Pokemon under the water so you can catch them on your phone with your fishing camera.
Yeah.
That'll be excellent. All right. Well, that's us with Coldbore Technology and Nerding Out.
All right.
Once again, I'm Craig Bergman.
Derek Mathewson.
John Thompson.
Wicked. And thank you very much, John, for joining us on today's episode. Please, as usual, like and subscribe. Put a comment in our YouTube. Don't forget to listen to us through Apple Podcasts or Spotify because we're available there. And looking forward to more suggestions on what you want us to talk about in the future. It'll be great. And thank you very much, John, for joining us.
Thanks a lot, guys. For anybody who's interested in learning more about Saga Wisdom, please visit our website at www.sagawisdom.com. Thank you.
Data in hand, we rock the bytes and we'll take a stand. Calculators flashing like a disco ball. Coldbore tech, hey, we answer the